Most people would have pocketed the cash and walked away. But Jessica Dugan wasn't most people. That night, she didn't just return a wallet, she stepped into a test of loyalty, power, and purpose that would rewrite her life. Jessica Dugan lived between frying pans and food stamps. Her world was ruled by double shifts, slow tips, and the silent wish that tomorrow might finally taste better than today. But one slow, greasy night behind the bar, she found a wallet, black leather, thick with cash and heavier than it should have been. The name stitched inside wasn't just anyone's. It belonged to Mauro Conti, the man whose name still made grown men speak softer in South Philly. Jessica didn't know it yet, but this wasn't a forgotten possession. It was bait, a test of character hidden in plain sight. Returning the wallet felt like the right thing to do. But the moment she picked up that phone, her world tilted. She hadn't just made a call, she'd been silently invited into a game only the desperate survive. Jessica Dugan was a shadow in a city that only cared when you lit it on fire. At 27, she juggled sticky menus, wiped down chipped counters, and paid down her brother's rehab bill one burned burger at a time. She was careful, kind, and too tired to believe in miracles unless they wore an apron and came with free pie. The late shift at Marlowe's wasn't glamorous, but it paid enough to keep the lights on and the dream of her own catering truck alive. That dream was plated in patience and priced in exhaustion. That night, she wasn't supposed to be there past midnight. But fate doesn't follow time cards. And tucked in the seams of booth 9, wrapped in leather and silence, was the one thing that would change everything. Before we continue, like this video and comment where you're watching from. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss another interesting story. Jessica stood behind the counter, her fingers still wrapped around the receiver, the line dead but buzzing in her ear. She slowly hung up the phone, its greasy surface suddenly feeling radioactive. The wallet, still resting on the bar, looked less like something lost and more like something planted, coiled, and waiting, like a trap disguised as leather. Outside, the street was quiet, but it didn't feel empty. It felt watched. She wiped her palms on her apron and locked the front door, the bolt clicking louder than it should have. The clock behind the register read 1:23 a.m. The bar had emptied out half an hour ago, leaving only the scent of old grease and the faint buzz of a neon beer sign. Jessica switched off the lights except the ones near the counter, letting the rest of the diner fall into murky shadow. She didn't sit. She couldn't. At 1:42, headlights drifted into view. A long, black vehicle glided up to the curb, cleaner than anything else on the block. It didn't park so much as settle, a large engine humming like a growl. The windows were tinted so dark, she couldn't even see the driver's silhouette. Her heartbeat synced to the low rumble. She unlocked the front door with trembling fingers. Cold air slithered in as the vehicle door opened. A man stepped out, tall, solid, dressed in a simple black overcoat that somehow screamed money without even trying. He moved with the quiet assurance of someone used to walking into danger and expecting it to move. His eyes scanned the street once before zeroing in on her. Jessica didn't speak. She simply held up the wallet, extending it across the counter like a peace offering. The man approached slowly, each footstep deliberate, his gloved hand reaching out. He took the wallet without opening it, his thumb brushing across the leather twice, like checking the weight. Then he slid it inside his coat. The silence stretched. Jessica Dugan? His voice was deep and inflectionless, an instrument with one note, command. She nodded, the motion small. He reached into the opposite side of his coat and placed a manila envelope on the counter exactly where the wallet had been. Then he pulled something else out, a small black flip phone, the kind no one used anymore. He set it next to the envelope. She stared at the two objects, neither moving toward them. Her instincts were flaring now, not screaming but whispering, "Don't touch it." It wasn't just a thank you. This was a transaction. The man didn't wait for a response. "You've been noted." Then he turned and exited, the bell above the door chiming once, sharp and final. The vehicle pulled away seconds later, no screech, no flare, just gone. Jessica locked the door again and flipped the sign to closed, though there hadn't been a customer in an hour. She looked down at the envelope and phone. The envelope was thick. Not like documents, thicker, heavier. With careful hands, she opened it. Inside was a neat stack of crisp $100 bills, banded and untouched. She counted fast, her fingers mechanical. 30 bills. $3,000. Her breath caught. That was rent for 2 months. That was her food truck's broken axle. That was temptation, packed in paper. She picked up the flip phone. It was powered off. No instructions. No number. Just a single word written on a small black card wedged under the clip. Wait. She set it back down like it burned her. Then she closed the envelope and stepped away. The register drawer clicked as she double-checked her closing duties, her mind miles away. She wiped down the bar, dumped the fryer oil, refilled the ketchup bottles. But the envelope remained in her peripheral vision. So did the phone. No matter how much she cleaned, the air felt dirty now. She finished her shift in silence. After locking up and stepping into the cool night, the city smelled different, like danger had perfume. The walk home was short, but her footsteps felt louder than usual. Her apartment was a 3-flight walk-up that always smelled like damp carpet and weed. She closed the door behind her and locked all 3 bolts. Jessica didn't sleep that night. She placed the envelope and the phone in a shoebox and slid it under her bed. She didn't touch the cash. Didn't turn the phone on. Instead, she sat on the edge of her bed and stared at the wall, her mind churning. A memory rose, her mother, standing over a tiny kitchen stove, boiling water in a dented pot. Jessica had been 12. They'd found a man's wallet at the bus stop. It had nearly $200 inside. Her mother had returned it without taking a cent. Easy money binds you harder than debt, she'd said, and Jessica had never forgotten it. By morning, she'd made a decision. She would go to work like normal. Ignore the envelope. Ignore the phone. And maybe, just maybe, this was over. 3 days passed. The phone didn't ring. No visitors. No men in black coats. She convinced herself it was over, that the test had ended and she'd passed. But every night she looked at the shoebox. Every night she resisted opening it. Until the 4th night. Jessica had just gotten home. She kicked off her shoes, pulled off her apron, and was about to shower when she heard it. Buzz. A sharp, singular sound. Foreign. Mechanical. Buzz. She froze. The flip phone vibrated again from under her bed. She dragged out the shoebox and opened it with trembling hands. The screen glowed green. One new message. She flipped it open and read the screen. Wait. That was it. One word. The same word as the card. Not a question. A command. She stared at it for a long time, heart hammering, thoughts spiraling. She didn't know what she'd expected, maybe silence forever. But this was worse. This was not over. Jessica powered off the phone and shoved it back into the shoebox. She didn't sleep that night either. At some point, she stopped pretending the money was a gift. She stopped pretending the call was a coincidence. This wasn't random. This was designed. She was being watched. Measured. The worst part? She still hadn't spent the money. And now it didn't feel like she owned it. It felt like it owned her. She stayed alert the rest of the week, looking over her shoulder, flinching when someone said her name too loudly, checking behind her after work. The diner felt different now. Like something had shifted behind the wallpaper. On the 7th night, she worked late again. She cleaned booths, restocked the napkins, changed the fryer oil. Routine. Normal. But nothing felt normal. And then, just after 1:30 a.m., she noticed it, booth 9. The same booth where she'd found the wallet. There was something new this time. A small, folded note. Nothing else. Jessica looked around. No customers. No signs of entry. Her stomach clenched. She picked up the note and unfolded it with care. It read, "You've shown restraint. That's rare. Keep the phone on. We'll be in touch." That was it. No signature. No logo. Just that chilling promise. She folded the note, put it in her pocket, and finished cleaning the booth in silence. Her hand lingered on the vinyl seat before pulling away. The rest of the night passed without incident. But something had changed. The game had begun, and she was already playing it. At 4:02 a.m., just as she was slipping off her apron, the burner phone buzzed again, this time with a new word. Soon. 7 days crawled by like years. Jessica went to work, scrubbed counters, and served hash browns like nothing had changed, but inside, something had. The money stayed hidden under her bed, the flip phone always powered off, though her hand hovered near it each morning. She hadn't spent a single bill, but the presence of the cash lingered in the apartment like a ghost. At night, her dreams stuttered between food trucks and black sedans. By day 4, she started spotting the same navy blue sedan parked 3 cars behind her usual bus stop. No plates she could memorize, no faces she recognized, just stillness. When she walked home, she crossed the street twice without reason. Her coworkers noticed the circles under her eyes, but she waved them off with mumbled jokes and fake yawns. Every time the burner phone buzzed in her imagination, her real heart skipped. It stayed silent. For a full week, nothing came. No messages, no deliveries, no new notes in booth 9. It almost felt like a dream she'd imagined in a half-asleep daze. But on the 8th day, at exactly 9:17 p.m., just as she was walking past the alley behind Marlowe's, the burner phone buzzed twice in her coat pocket. Jessica froze. Her fingers fumbled as she pulled it out, the green screen glowing softly in the dark. One new message. 3 words. You work tonight. Her stomach dropped like a snapped elevator cable. There were no follow-up instructions, no address. Just that chilling confirmation. She stared at the screen, her breath fogging in the cool spring night. For a second, she thought about not responding. But the second passed, and her feet started moving on their own. Back inside the diner, she told her manager, an old ex-boxer named Rick, that she was clocking out early. You sick? He asked, raising an eyebrow. Sort of, she muttered. Just need to handle something. She didn't wait for permission. By the time she reached her apartment, another message had arrived. Black sedan. Northwest corner. 15 minutes. Wear your uniform. Jessica didn't ask why. Something about the tone, dry, stripped of emotion, didn't allow for questions. She slipped out of her jacket, checked her hair in the mirror, and retied her apron with trembling fingers. Then she powered the burner phone fully on, grabbed her keys, and left. She didn't take the envelope of cash. The black sedan was waiting exactly where promised. Tinted windows, engine already running. The back door popped open before she reached it. Inside was dark, no greeting, no face, just a clean leather seat and a folded manila envelope resting beside her. She climbed in. The door shut with a muted thunk and the car pulled away, slow and smooth. The driver didn't speak. Jessica didn't try. She picked up the envelope and saw her name typed neatly across the front, J. Dugan. She didn't open it. Didn't need to. Whatever this was, it had weight. Not just literal weight, but a kind of pressure that made the air thin. She clutched it in her lap like it might explode. After 15 minutes of silent streets and sharp turns, the sedan rolled to a stop outside a gleaming glass building downtown. A doorman in a charcoal suit held the entrance open, nodding once as if he'd been told to expect her. Jessica stepped out, envelope in hand. No instructions, just intuition. The lobby was marble and silence, lit with a gold hue that made her feel dirty for wearing sneakers. A concierge desk stretched across the far wall, mahogany, brass, and clean enough to reflect your sins. Behind it stood a man in a tailored suit, hair slicked, hands folded. When he saw her, he tilted his head slightly, as if amused. "Miss Dugan?" he asked, not blinking. She nodded. "Penthouse envelope?" Another nod. She stepped forward, offered the envelope like it was an apology. He took it, glancing at her name before tucking it into a locked drawer without looking inside. "Thank you. That will be all." She stood there a beat too long. Waiting for what? A receipt? A clue? A reaction? But the man turned back to his desk, already finished with her. Jessica walked out as the automatic doors slid shut behind her. She didn't exhale until the sedan reappeared, the back door popping open once more. She got in. Again, no one spoke. The car didn't return her home right away. It drove for 20 minutes in a zigzagging route through the city's quiet veins. Then, finally, it coasted to a stop 3 doors down from her apartment. She stepped out and watched it disappear like a thought. Her apartment door felt heavier than usual. The hallway lights flickered twice before she reached her unit. When she turned the key, she sensed it instantly. Something was different. She pushed the door open. On the center of her bed sat a second envelope. The exact same type as before, manila, neat, unmarked. But this one was thicker, fatter, almost smug. Jessica didn't approach it immediately. She stood in the doorway, staring like it might get up and walk away. Finally, she crossed the room and picked it up. Same card on top. You've done well. The next test will not be so quiet. Inside, $5,000 in crisp, sequential bills. Not a cent less. No explanation. No instructions. Just money and silence. Jessica dropped onto the edge of the mattress, envelope in hand, thoughts spiraling like loose change. Was this a reward? A bribe? A warning? She didn't know anymore. She looked over at the burner phone on her nightstand. The green light blinked twice and went still. If you were Jessica, would you take the money and stay silent, or walk away while you still can? Let us know in the comments what you would do if a powerful stranger suddenly inserted you into a game of loyalty, silence, and cash. And if you're hooked already, subscribe for the next part. Jessica's real test is only just beginning. Jessica didn't hear from anyone for 3 days after the envelope appeared. She didn't touch the $5,000. It remained in the shoebox under her bed, along with the first envelope and the black card with that now familiar word, wait. Every night, she locked all 3 bolts and checked the peephole twice before sleeping. But sleep didn't come easy anymore. The burner phone remained on, screen dim but steady on her nightstand. She started dreaming in green pixels. Every time it buzzed in her head, she woke up reaching for it. When it finally did light up, it was just after 11 p.m. on a Thursday. The message was direct. Pick up. Midnight. Santino's Bakery. South Side Alley. No one sees you. She didn't question the location. Santino's was closed at that hour, a family-owned bakery that had been in South Philly for 60 years. But she'd never seen anyone go in or out after 9 p.m., and the storefront always looked too clean, too preserved. She changed quickly, not bothering with makeup or earrings. Just jeans, a hoodie, and her diner sneakers. She pocketed the burner phone and pulled her hair into a tight bun. Outside, the streets were wet from earlier rain. Traffic had thinned to a trickle, and the street lamps cast long, yellow reflections on the pavement. She walked the 12 blocks, cutting through narrow back streets, her ears tuned for footsteps. Her instincts were louder than any sound. By the time she turned onto Baker Street, her pulse was racing. Santino's looked shuttered, windows dark, the closed sign swinging in the faint breeze. But the alley beside it wasn't empty. A single light above the back door flickered weakly, and beneath it sat a black briefcase. No one around. No notes. Just the case, waiting for her like it had a name tag. Jessica approached it slowly, glancing up and down the alley. Her hands hovered over the handle for a moment before she grabbed it. It wasn't heavy, but it had heft, solid, secure. She didn't shake it, didn't peek inside. The message had said no one sees you. She turned and walked quickly toward the next destination, Club Lucenti, 5 blocks east. She didn't need directions. Everyone knew Lucenti's. It was the kind of place people entered with secrets and left with debts. The briefcase thudded gently against her leg as she walked. The streets felt even quieter now, like the city was holding its breath. Halfway through her route, she crossed onto Market Street, and that's when she saw it, a black sedan in her peripheral vision. Same shape, same windows, same slow roll. It didn't rush. It kept pace with her, staying 2 car lengths behind. At first, she thought it was coincidence. Then she crossed the street. So did the car. Jessica quickened her pace, heart hammering. The briefcase suddenly felt too loud in her hand. She ducked into a side alley, circled the block, and emerged from the other side. The sedan was gone. But her sense of safety didn't return. Lucenti's back entrance sat in a narrow service alley behind a chain-link gate. She buzzed the call button once. The door opened 10 seconds later, no words, just a man in a dark t-shirt and gloves. He took the briefcase and shut the door. That was it. Jessica stood there for a moment, unsure whether to feel relieved or unsettled. She had followed every instruction. But someone else had followed her too. That wasn't part of the plan. She walked home, checking behind her every few steps. The rain had returned, soft and constant, and she didn't have an umbrella. The water soaked through her hoodie, clinging to her shoulders like a second skin. When she got to her building, she took the stairs instead of the elevator. The hallway light outside her door was flickering again, same as it had the night the first envelope appeared. She reached for her keys and stopped. The doormat was off-center. Her stomach twisted as she stared at it. She always lined it up. Always. She slid the key into the lock and pushed open the door. Nothing was broken. Nothing missing. But everything was slightly wrong. The coat rack was moved an inch to the left. The kitchen chair pulled just slightly away from the table. One of her shoe boxes sat sideways under the bed, not the way she'd left it. The envelopes were still inside, the money untouched. But someone had been here. Jessica closed the door quietly behind her and bolted it. Then she picked up the burner phone, hands shaking. She hit the call button. It rang once. "Miss Dugan," said the voice on the other end. Calm. Male. Familiar. "I was followed," she said, voice tight. "You weren't harmed," Mauro Conti replied. "You knew they were there?" she asked. "I know many things," he said, tone level as a scalpel. "That car was not mine." She paused. "So who was it?" "If I thought you needed to know," he said, "you'd know." Jessica's jaw clenched. "Someone was in my apartment." "I imagine that's unsettling," Conti said, not a trace of apology. "Why?" she snapped. "Why are you doing this?" There was a pause on the line. Not silence, calculated silence. Then he spoke again. "I don't need questions, Miss Dugan. I need consistency." She let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "And what exactly do I get in return?" "You're still alive," he said. And then the line went dead. Jessica sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the phone in her hand. That brief flicker of courage faded into a quiet, burning rage. She was being used, sized, weighed, dragged deeper with each silent transaction. And still, she had no idea what the endgame was. But she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't out. She was in. All the way in. Jessica got up to relock the door and noticed the burner phone was already buzzing again. The message came on a folded black card, slipped under her apartment door sometime between 3 and 4 a.m. No sound, no knock, no camera catching who did it. Just the card, with elegant silver lettering that read, "Be ready. Black car. 7:30 p.m. dress clean." The handwriting was sharp, slanted, like it belonged to someone who never second-guessed a word. Jessica stared at it like it might change if she blinked. She didn't know where the car would take her. But something in her gut told her this would be different, more direct. The envelope money still sat untouched, but her fridge was nearly empty, her rent overdue, and her shoes had new holes in them. She had questions that had gone unanswered for too long. Tonight, she wanted more than silence. At 7:29 on the dot, the black car rolled up outside her building. She was already waiting on the steps, dressed in dark jeans, a fitted blazer, and the only heels she owned that didn't click too loudly. The driver said nothing, just tipped his head once. She climbed in, the door shutting behind her with the finality of a decision already made. The car pulled away, merging into the city like a whisper no one could trace. The drive was short and smooth, taking her past neon dive bars and into a quieter, older part of the city where money didn't flash, it smirked. They pulled up outside a place called Cadenza, the kind of cigar lounge you only ever heard about in stories whispered by men in suits with things to hide. The windows were smoked glass, and the entrance had no signage, just a brass lion's head knocker and a security camera that turned as she approached. The driver opened the door for her, but didn't get out. She stepped onto the sidewalk alone. A man in a charcoal three-piece suit was waiting inside the door. Miss Dugan, he said with a nod, and gestured for her to follow. The air smelled of tobacco leaves, aged wood, and power. Dark paneling lined the walls, and leather chairs sat in low clusters beneath golden sconces. She was led past them all to a private lounge in the back, quiet, too still, like even the room was watching. Mauro Conti sat alone in a corner booth, dressed in a midnight blue suit and a pressed white shirt with cufflinks that probably cost more than her rent. He wasn't smoking, but an open cigar case sat on the table beside two untouched glasses of scotch. His eyes lifted to meet hers, dark, unreadable, and utterly calm. "Miss Dugan," he said, standing just enough to nod. "Please. Sit." She obeyed without a word. The cushion hissed as she settled in. She waited for him to speak first. He poured one glass and slid it toward her, not breaking eye contact. "You've done everything I've asked." Quietly. Efficiently. Without complaint. Jessica didn't touch the drink. "Is that why I'm here?" "No," he said. "You're here because you haven't broken." His voice was smooth, deliberate, like he chose every syllable with surgical precision. "Most people crack after the second job. You didn't. You're resilient." She sat straighter. "You've had me followed. Watched. My apartment." "Yes," he said, cutting her off gently. "And you're still here." The room pressed in around her, thick with unspoken things. Conti leaned back, folding his hands. "You didn't ask questions. That matters more than you think." Jessica finally reached for the scotch, but only held the glass. "What is this really?" she asked. "Because I don't believe you give out cash and burner phones just to be mysterious." He smiled slightly, an expression that never reached his eyes. "This is an opportunity." Her eyebrows lifted. "For what? Silence? Fear?" "For freedom," he said. "The kind most people never get. No more paycheck to paycheck. No more food stamps. No more landlords with loud shoes and louder threats." She stared at him. He continued. "I'll clear your debt. Fund your catering business. Set you up in a better apartment. You'll have startup capital, licensing, equipment. Everything you need." She felt her chest tighten. Her dream, laid out like a buffet. "In exchange for what?" she whispered. Conti didn't blink. "Total discretion. Unquestioned service. And loyalty without exception." Jessica's hands curled into fists in her lap. "So I become yours." "You already are," he said calmly. "You returned the wallet. That was your handshake. The moment you called me, you said yes." "I didn't know what I was saying yes to," she muttered. "You didn't need to," he said, voice colder now. "People like you don't get options like this unless they earn them. And you have. You've proven you can follow orders. Keep your mouth shut. Move in and out without being seen." "But I don't know what I'm delivering," she snapped. "I don't even know who I'm working for." "You're working for yourself," he said. "I'm just the hand opening the door." Silence hung between them like a blade. Her mind screamed at her to get up, to walk out. But her heart beat to the rhythm of a food truck bell and long summer nights serving dishes she made herself. Connie saw that flicker in her expression. "That's the dilemma," he said softly. "You don't want to trust me. But part of you already has." Jessica stared down at her glass, its amber surface unmoving. "Why me?" she asked. He leaned in slightly. "Because everyone else took the money and disappeared. You stayed. You asked. You cared. That makes you dangerous and useful." She hated how much it made sense. Hated even more that part of her wanted to believe him. "Say yes," he said, voice barely above a whisper, "and your life changes tonight." Jessica took a long breath. Then another. But she didn't speak. Conti stood and adjusted his cufflinks. "You already accepted the contract, Miss Dugan," he said with finality. "The moment you returned the wallet." Then he walked away, leaving her alone with the scotch, the silence, and the impossible weight of what she now understood wasn't a choice. It was a chain made of gold. If Conti offered you everything you ever wanted, would you say yes, knowing the cost was your freedom? Let us know in the comments, what would you have done in Jessica's shoes? And don't forget to subscribe to follow her journey as the stakes rise and her choices get even harder. Jessica moved out on a Sunday morning with no boxes and no forwarding address. The keys to her new apartment arrived in a navy envelope tucked into her mailbox. No return name, just a typed note. Unit 9C. View included. It was in a modern building near the river, with polished elevators and a door that didn't stick when it rained. Inside, the floors were hardwood, the walls soft gray, and the kitchen gleamed like a commercial set. Stainless steel appliances, a 5-burner stove, and enough counter space to stage her entire food truck menu. She stood in the center of it the first night, barefoot, too stunned to cry. It wasn't just the beauty, it was the absence of struggle. No rusted sink. No burnt toast smell. No neighbors screaming through paper-thin walls. Just silence, cool air, and a kind of luxury she never thought she'd taste. The next morning, a delivery truck arrived without warning. 2 men carried in sleek white boxes marked with brand names she didn't recognize but instantly Googled. A stand mixer that cost more than her monthly rent at the old place. Chef's knives, high-end pots, cutting boards that were basically art. Every tool she'd ever stared at online had arrived without her asking. On the fridge was another note. Consider this seed capital. Create something worth growing. No signature, but she knew. Conti's voice wasn't on the paper, but it was there all the same, measured, watching, always one step ahead. She placed the note in the drawer next to the burner phone, which never left her nightstand. She still hadn't turned it off. For the first time in years, Jessica started cooking again. Not reheating, not scrambling, cooking. She roasted duck legs in orange glaze. Baked pear tarts with almond crusts. Made pasta from scratch, just to prove she could. The first night she plated a meal for herself, she sat at the marble island and wept. She enrolled in a culinary business course downtown, paying tuition in full with an envelope of hundreds. No questions were asked, money that crisp doesn't raise flags, it smooths them. Her classmates were young, bright-eyed, future restaurateurs. She took notes obsessively, aced every test, kept to herself. But every time the instructor said the words, independent venture, she felt a twinge of guilt. Because Jessica knew she wasn't independent. Not anymore. Every piece of her dream had been laid out by someone else's hand. The stove, the knives, the walls, they were hers in use, but not in origin. And in the back of her mind, she knew it. The burner phone rang for the first time in weeks during a Wednesday class. She was icing lemon cakes when the buzz cut through the kitchen like a razor. Her heart spiked. She excused herself, phone in pocket, stepping into the alley behind the school. The screen glowed green with one word, now. A second message followed. Locker number 47, 6th and Birch Gym. Package inside. Deliver to 73 Venta Ridge. Speak to no one. She didn't hesitate. By now, she knew better than to ask questions. She wiped her hands, removed her apron, and slipped out through the side exit. 20 minutes later, she was at the gym, breathing fast, adrenaline thrumming. The locker wasn't locked, just shut. Inside, wrapped in a soft cloth, was a small glass vial. Clear liquid. No label. It looked like nothing, and yet Jessica felt its weight like a confession. She slipped it into her coat pocket and left. Venta Ridge was a gated community in the northern part of the city, old money and new surveillance. The house at 73 was a fortress disguised as a villa. A man in a black vest opened the gate before she even buzzed. "Miss Dugan," he said, already expecting her. "Right this way." He led her down a long stone corridor, through a glass door, and into what looked like a private medical suite. Dim lights. Soft machines humming. A woman in a pale silk robe sat upright on a gurney, pale as porcelain, eyes rimmed in shadows. Jessica didn't ask who she was or what the vial was for. She just placed it gently in the nurse's gloved hand and stepped back. No one thanked her. No one explained. The nurse nodded once, and the man in the vest returned to escort her out. As they reached the front door, he finally spoke. "You're reliable," he said. "That's rare." Jessica didn't respond. She was already thinking about the burner phone. What else was coming? Back at her apartment, the smell of rosemary lamb still lingered from the night before. She peeled off her coat, washed her hands twice, and turned off the stove she hadn't used. For the first time in weeks, she didn't cook that night. She sat on the floor of her new kitchen, legs folded, the silence pressing down like a closing lid. All of it, the apartment, the gear, the class, the compliments, was real. Tangible. But it didn't feel earned. It felt orchestrated. She was walking through a life that someone else had storyboarded. Still, she couldn't lie to herself. She loved the stove. The taste of fresh mango chutney on seared scallops. The way the saucepan gleamed under the morning light. The dream was real. But as she sat there, her back against the cool gray cabinet, she remembered something Conti had said. Say yes, and your life changes tonight. It had. Her cooking dream was real now. But dreams weren't free. The message came just past midnight, glowing on the burner phone like a pulse. No call, no explanation, just 5 words. Pick up. Rossi's Bakery. Rear door. Jessica sat up in bed, her heartbeat already outpacing the silence around her. Rossi's hadn't been open in years. The windows were boarded, the signage faded, the place more rumor than location. She didn't ask questions. She dressed quickly, black jeans, hoodie, sneakers, slipped the phone into her pocket, and tied her hair back tight. No weapon, no light, just the keys to a car she didn't technically own, but had appeared in her building garage last week with a note. Yours. Use only when called. The drive was short but heavy, every red light stretching like a warning. The streets were mostly dead, the air cold enough to burn her lungs. She parked in the alley behind Rossi's and killed the engine. There was no sign of anyone. No package, no briefcase, not even a marked door. She stepped out cautiously, her eyes scanning the shadows like they might speak. That's when she heard it, a low groan, raw and wet, from behind the dumpster near the loading dock. She approached slowly, breath tight. The package was a man. He was slumped against the brick wall, half conscious, blood soaking through the front of his shirt. One hand clutched his side, the other reaching toward nothing. His lips moved, barely audible, repeating the same few words. Books, real books. He's scared of them. Jessica knelt, eyes wide, panic rising. He wasn't just hurt. He was hunted. Hey, she whispered, placing a hand on his shoulder. What happened? The man blinked up at her, glassy-eyed. Tell Conti. They'll flip if they see the real numbers. Not sanitized, not the ones you're holding. He coughed, dark blood bubbling at the corner of his mouth. Jessica pulled out her phone, tried 911. Nothing. Call failed. No signal. She tried again. Voicemail. Again. No tone. She tried her own cell next. It rang. Then cut. Then nothing. Dead air. Like a signal jammed by something too large for her to see. She turned to the burner phone. One option left. It rang once. Then a voice answered, sharp, direct, not Conti, but someone who clearly answered for him. Status? The voice asked. It's not a pickup, she snapped. It's a man. He's bleeding badly. Silence. Then, location. Rossi's. He's saying things about books, about Conti. Keep him alive, the voice interrupted. Do not call anyone else. Do not leave. Someone is coming. The line went dead. Jessica stared at the phone, then at the man who now lay slumped lower against the wall. He wasn't stable. His pulse was weak. His breathing ragged. This wasn't a courier run. It was something else. She looked around the alley. No light. No help. No mercy. Just her, a dying man, and too many unspoken truths. She dragged him gently by the arms, pulling him into the rear hallway of Rossi's. The door wasn't locked. Inside was dust and cold, broken tiles, and a single wooden table that had once been used for dough. She laid him there, his legs limp, blood now soaking through both their clothes. She ripped off her hoodie, pressed it to the wound. Stay with me, she whispered. What's your name? The man mumbled, incoherent. Then suddenly, he keeps 2 sets. Public and private. Clean and dirty. Only the second one matters. Jessica's hands froze. Her stomach twisted. Whatever this man had seen or done, it wasn't just about money. It was about power. And something Conti didn't want exposed. Her brain screamed at her to leave. to walk away and pretend she never saw this man, never heard his words. But her hands kept pressure on the wound, her pulse sinking to the rhythm of his breath. She had saved a life once before, unofficially, years ago, her brother's overdose. This wasn't new, but this was different. Footsteps echoed from outside. She grabbed the nearest heavy object, a rusted rolling pin, and stood just beyond the broken window of the door. A figure stepped into view. Tall, black coat, familiar outline. One of Conti's. "Miss Dugan," the voice asked, calm and cool. Jessica lowered the rolling pin but didn't relax. "He's in here," she said. The man entered without urgency, as if walking into an appointment. He looked down at the injured man, then at Jessica, then back again. "You kept him breathing. Good." He reached into his coat and pulled out a compact medkit, military grade. "You a doctor?" she asked. "Field trained," he replied. "For people like him." "What does that mean?" she asked. "It means this isn't your concern." "I heard what he said," she pressed. "No, you witnessed what he said," the man corrected. "That's not the same." She felt the chill ripple through her skin. He worked quickly, applying sealant, painkillers, and wrapping the wound. "He'll live," he said. "Now you do what you're told." "Which is?" "Keep quiet. Lock this place. Don't leave. Someone else is coming. To speak with you." He started lifting the man into a seated position, clearly preparing for exfil. "You said I wasn't supposed to leave," she said. "You're not," he confirmed. "But you're not going anywhere." "We are." Jessica watched them disappear into the alley, the bleeding man propped like luggage, leaving only streaks of red and silence behind. She stood alone in the dusty bakery, heart pounding. Her knees finally gave, and she sank to the floor, back against the wall. For a long moment, she said nothing, thought nothing, just breathed. Then she heard the lock click from outside. Someone had locked the door from the outside. She was alone. But not really. And for the first time since this began, Jessica felt fear that wasn't temporary. She realized she wasn't just a delivery girl. She was a vault. A container for secrets. And someone, maybe everyone, was testing how long she could keep them. Jessica locked the inside bolt, walked back to the blood-stained table, and knelt beside the spot where the man had laid. The air still warm. The silence full. She was part of something far darker than she had ever imagined. Jessica didn't leave the bakery for hours after they locked her inside. The blood had been scrubbed away, but the air still tasted like iron and adrenaline. She sat on the floor beneath a cracked window, knees drawn to her chest, replaying the man's words over and over in her mind. "Real books. He's scared of them, not the ones you're holding." Nothing made sense, but everything pointed to one truth. Conti wasn't just powerful, he was afraid of something. And fear in a man like him was as dangerous as a loaded weapon. By the time the lock clicked open again, dawn was teasing the edge of the sky. Another one of Conti's men entered, tall, silent, nodding only once. He handed her a thermos of coffee and a note. "You're free to go," he said. "No explanations, no questions, no answers." Jessica didn't speak. She didn't drink the coffee. She walked out the same back door she'd entered, stepped into a city that looked the same but no longer felt like it belonged to her. On the drive home, her fingers hovered over the burner phone again and again. She didn't know what she'd say to Conti, but she knew she needed to say it herself. She waited until her hands stopped shaking. Then she hit dial. The phone didn't even ring once. "Miss Dugan," Conti's voice came through, cool and clean like marble. "I wondered when you'd call." "You know where I've been," she said, standing in the center of her kitchen, the morning sun hitting the edges of her butcher block. "You knew what was waiting." "Yes," he replied. Her breath caught in her throat. "Why?" "Because you're further in than you realize," he said, calm as ever. "And the deeper you go, the more I need to see if you can hold the weight." Jessica gritted her teeth. He was dying. He was bleeding all over me and talking about numbers and secrets and how you're afraid of what's real. "And you left me with him." "Alone." "That was the point," Conti said. "To see what you would do." "You think this is a test?" she snapped. You think putting someone's life in my hands is just another checkbox in your little file on me? No, he said. It was the final box. Silence stretched between them like wire ready to snap. Jessica swallowed hard, her voice cracking on the next words. What is this really, Conti? What am I to you? A recruitment, he answered. The wallet was never lost. It was bait. You were observed from the moment you picked it up. Monitored. Measured. Not for greed, but for control. You passed. Her knees buckled slightly, and she caught herself against the counter. Past what? You're the only one in 5 years, he said. The only one who didn't steal, didn't ask for more, didn't run. Every other candidate took the money and disappeared. You didn't. Jessica shook her head. So I'm some kind of chosen one? You're useful, he replied. And disciplined. I don't need soldiers who ask questions. I need shadows that obey. She laughed bitterly. You talk about discipline, but you hide behind layers of men, fake jobs, and encrypted phones. You act like you're untouchable, but you're the one running. There was a long pause. Then his voice returned, quieter now. You think I'm hiding? I think you're scared, she said. Of what's in those books. Of what people might find if the mask slips even a little. Another pause. Then a low chuckle. You have fire, Conti said. I knew that. But now I see the edges of it. That's good. I don't want your compliments, she hissed. No, he said. But you want something. Security. Power. A life beyond paycheck to paycheck. I wanted to earn it, she said. With food. With joy. With something clean. That's not how the world works, Jessica, Conti replied. The dream is real. I gave it to you. But the foundation it stands on is mine. Jessica turned away from the window, pacing. And if I walk away? You don't, he said. You can't know what you know. You've touched the structure now. You've heard things that don't get unheard. You walk away, and you're a liability. Then why give me the choice? Because loyalty means nothing if it's forced, he said. But if it's chosen freely, it becomes iron. Jessica went still. You're not my soldier yet, Miss Dugan, Conti said. But you will be. And then the line went dead. Jessica stared at the burner phone. It screened dark again, as if the call had never happened, but everything had just changed. If someone handed you power, safety, and purpose, but only after controlling your every move, would you still believe you were free? Let us know your answer in the comments below. And if you're following Jessica's descent into the shadows, subscribe now, because her next move might just turn her from pawn to player. It started with another message, no greeting, no context, just an address and a time, for 29 Mercer Street. Now, Jessica didn't hesitate. She grabbed her coat, the burner phone, and a small duffel bag she had started keeping by the door, just in case. She didn't ask what waited for her. She already knew it wouldn't be clean. The building was abandoned, a 3-story husk of old brick and rotting wood, tucked between an empty lot and a pawn shop with flickering signage. The door was open. Not broken, not kicked in, just ajar. Like someone had entered, but no one ever left. She stepped inside, heart thudding like it had before every test, but this time, the fear was heavier. He was in the back room, crumpled on the floor like discarded laundry. Blood soaked through his dress shirt and pooled beneath him, dark and too still. His breaths were shallow, jaw slack, eyes rolling in and out of consciousness. She recognized him, not his name, but his face. He was the one from the bakery. The whisperer. The man who knew something he shouldn't. Jessica knelt quickly, pressing 2 fingers to his neck. Pulse barely. She yanked off her coat and folded it beneath his head, then tore the sleeves off her sweater. One she used to apply pressure. The other she wrapped tight around his abdomen. It wasn't sterile. It wasn't right. But it was all she had. The bleeding wasn't slowing. She tried dialing 911 again, blocked. Tried calling the number that had sent her the address. No answer. She screamed into the room, hoping someone was nearby. Silence answered. Not even footsteps. She checked the wound again, upper abdomen, deep laceration, but not spurting arterial blood. Likely missed the liver. Still, if he didn't get fluids or stitching soon, he wouldn't make it. Jessica's mind flipped into overdrive, recalling everything her best friend Shira had ever said about triage. She rolled him onto his side, elevated his legs with a broken chair cushion, and found an old mop bucket to wash her hands. Useless, but routine gave her calm. Her hands moved faster than her mind now. She found a cleanish towel in the corner and pressed it hard into the wound, holding with all her weight. "Come on," she whispered. "You don't get to die yet." The man groaned, eyelids fluttering. "Tell Conti," he gasped. "Tell him. He doesn't know what they did." Jessica leaned closer. "Who?" she asked. But he slipped under again, his body twitching with shock. She checked her phone, no signal, no updates. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Her arms burned from holding pressure. Her knees ached from the concrete. She felt blood soaking into her jeans and didn't care. Finally, headlights cut through the broken window. A black SUV rolled to a stop. No engine rev. Just presence. The front door opened with a single groan of rust. 2 men entered. Neither smiled. Neither spoke. They moved like cleanup crews, silent and precise. One checked the wounded man's vitals while the other unpacked a sterile field kit. The taller one glanced at Jessica. "You kept him alive," he said. She nodded, too tired to pretend it wasn't instinct. "Impressive," he added, but without warmth. They worked quickly. Hooked up a small portable 4, dressed the wound with actual gauze, secured him to a stretcher with built-in stabilizers. The kind of equipment that didn't come from a hospital. The kind Connie's people kept in trunks. As they wheeled the man out, the shorter one turned and approached Jessica. He held something small and black in his gloved hand. It wasn't the burner phone she already had. It was another one. Sleeker. New. Still in its plastic. "This one's for emergencies," he said, placing it in her hand. "Keep both on you. Always." Jessica stared at the new phone. It was heavier than it looked. Or maybe that was just everything finally catching up with her. She swallowed hard. "Is this what I am now?" she asked. The man didn't answer. He just gave her one last look, a look not of kindness or judgment, but of confirmation. Then he followed the stretcher into the SUV. The door shut behind him like a vault. Jessica stood alone in the dim room, blood drying on her sleeves, sweat running cold down her spine. She looked at the phone in her hand, then at the one in her coat pocket. 2 phones now. 2 lives. But only one choice. She didn't cry, didn't scream. She just walked out of the building, her steps steady, her breath slow, her heart no longer racing. That version of fear was behind her. What was left now was something worse, certainty. By the time she reached the sidewalk, the SUV was gone. Just like before. No evidence. No words. Just her and the empty street. She didn't go home. Not right away. She sat on a park bench 2 blocks away, stared at the second phone, and tried to remember the version of herself that used to care what time the buses ran. That girl had just saved a man's life with nothing but muscle memory and kitchen towels. That girl didn't exist anymore. Conti had been right. She couldn't walk away now. Not because she feared him, but because the line between right and necessary had blurred so deeply she wasn't sure which side she was on anymore. When she finally stood and walked toward home, the weight of the second phone pressed against her palm, and for the first time, she didn't fight it. "You're in now, Dugan," she whispered to herself. Jessica walked down 9th Street just after noon, coffee in hand, hoodie pulled up against the early spring wind. The sky was a washed-out blue, the kind that made the city feel like it was holding its breath. She slowed as she neared the corner of Lambert and Vernon, her footsteps catching on memory more than pavement. The diner sat right where she left it, Marlowe's, still chipped, still flickering. In the front window, her old red uniform hung on a crooked wire hanger. It looked small now, stiff with starch and old grease, faded at the collar where she'd scrubbed out sauce and sweat. She remembered the sound of clattering plates, the static of the greasy intercom, the feel of sticky menus and fake smiles. She stood there for a full minute before walking past. No one noticed her. Inside, someone else was wiping the counter, someone younger maybe, or more desperate. She didn't peer in to find out. That life was behind her now, boxed and shelved in a part of her mind she didn't need to open anymore. The girl who clocked in for 12-hour shifts and counted tips in the dark was gone. In her place stood someone quieter and much harder to knock over. She'd catered for Connie's estate 2 nights ago. Just 10 trays, nothing flashy. Mediterranean spread, hand-rolled ravioli, lamb skewers seasoned with crushed rosemary and thyme. Her prep space was sterile, her delivery method flawless. She didn't stay to watch them eat. The man who answered the door wore gloves and didn't speak. He took the food, signed the clipboard, and shut the door without a nod. No feedback. No complaints. And yet, the next morning, a message arrived. Excellent. You'll be called again. That was Conti's style. No applause. No affirmation. Just repetition. You proved yourself not by being praised, but by being summoned again. 3 days later, her catering license was approved. Expedited, of course. The woman at the city office had blinked twice when she saw the stamp, red ink, cleared fees, no backlog. Jessica had said nothing. Just smiled like she didn't know someone behind a desk in a room without windows had pushed her file to the top. She got her logo printed on stickers and labels. Started taking small gigs through quiet referrals, birthdays, private luncheons, poker nights in places that had no business serving food that good. The business grew fast. Too fast. But she didn't slow it down. Because she knew who she was feeding. She still checked every new number that texted her. Still kept both burner phones charged and nearby. One buzzed more often than the other, usually after midnight. The messages were simple. Tomorrow. Short notice. Add 4 portions. No questions. She followed every instruction. Every time. She cooked with precision, with discipline. Not joy, not anymore. The joy was there, deep down, in the memory of what cooking used to be. But now it came wrapped in tension. She measured every grain of salt, not for flavor, but for control. Sometimes, in the early hours of the morning, she stood in her kitchen staring at the knives. Not thinking anything specific, just aware of them. Their weight. Their edge. The way they shimmered in the light like they were waiting to be something more than tools. The new apartment felt like hers now. She'd painted one wall, bought a rug, added plants. But there were no family photos, no notes on the fridge, no personal mail. Everything was professional. Everything was monitored. She knew Conti had eyes on her. Probably ears too. Maybe even backups of her texts and call logs. It didn't matter anymore. Surveillance wasn't the scariest part. It was how quickly she'd stopped caring. Fear had turned into muscle memory. One afternoon, she walked into a specialty food store near Rittenhouse to pick up imported olives. A woman at the register smiled and said, "You're Jessica Dugan, right? My friend raved about your lamb stew." Jessica smiled back. Said thanks. Felt a flicker of something, pride, maybe, but it died before it reached her chest. The woman continued, "Do you do public events? Like street fairs or festivals?" Jessica shook her head. "Sorry. I stay private." And she meant it. There was no public anymore. Not for her. Because the business had become the front. The dream, so bright and clean once, now wore a darker skin. Everything tasted the same, but it was plated on porcelain borrowed from Shadow. Her biggest client wasn't listed on any spreadsheet. Her most consistent orders came through encrypted texts. And yet, she kept going. Not because she was trapped, but because she had adapted. Jessica Dugan had become someone who moved through the undercurrent without flinching. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was executing. Conti hadn't spoken to her directly since the night of the confrontation call. But she felt his presence in everything that worked when it shouldn't, cleared when it couldn't, succeeded when it had no business doing so. He didn't need to hover. His debt lived in the walls. And Jessica? She wore it now. Not in red polyester and diner shoes, but in white coats, nitrile gloves, silent deliveries, and second burner phones. A new uniform. Clean. Functional. Dangerous. The old uniform still hung in the window. She saw it again 2 weeks later, walking past the diner at dusk. This time, she didn't stop. Didn't glance inside. Jess kept walking, a catering crate in one hand and secrets tucked under her skin like salt in a wound. Doing the right thing got her here. Staying alive would depend on doing the wrong thing very, very well. If you listened to this story until the very end, thank you. We have a playlist of interesting stories like this. See it on your top right screen. Enjoy!